Okay, the next assembly we're going to tackle is the back gear assembly. This is the third piece that we took off of the head of the machine. It contains the back gear and sets below that pulley assembly. Real quick, what the relationship is here, this is the shaft that actually goes through that variable speed pulley. This is the front of the machine. This is the timing belt. And this shaft sits in here, sort of, and it drives both the back gear pulley, and if you notice down here, there's a set of dog clutches that engage the back gear directly for direct drive. In just a minute, you'll see how it shifts between the two. The first thing we've got to take off is the pulley itself. Now this thing, especially this nut, is normally really, really tight. It can be a pain to get off because you got to hold the thing. A couple ways you can do it. With a strap wrench, you can stick the old timing belt around it and clamp it on with a pair of vice grips and try and hold it that way and kill yourself trying to get that nut off. The easiest way is with an impact wrench. Either an electric or an air impact, or if you've got a modern drill driver. So we're going in the right direction. Now the other thing that's stuck on here real well is the pulley. And the basic principle is just to pry it off. And of course, always when you pry on both sides so it comes off straight, otherwise you're just fighting yourself. Get a set of these pry bars. They're really cheap. Got these at Harbor Freight. You know, in this case, it's really hard to screw up making a pry bar, so get a set of these. Sometimes you have to induce it a little bit. If you do, never ever, and this is true of any shaft, never ever pound right on the end of the shaft because you will pin it over and make a mess of the threads. Screw the nut on it. If you can, screw it so it's even with the end of the shaft, and stick your pry bar in there, put pressure on it, and tap. Don't wail, never wail. If you have to wail on something, something's wrong. But tap it good, and hopefully it'll come right up. So this one should come off pretty easily. Because I'm cheating, and I already took it off once. Next thing we're going to take off is this cover plate. Sometimes these are slotted screws, occasionally they're hex cap screws. There goes the cover plate. Now, virtually always, if it's been lubed right, this whole area is packed with grubby grease. This one's really dry, and it was actually dry when I first took that cover plate off. Now you can see sort of the mechanism that's involved. This is the back gear. The spindle shaft is splined to the middle of the back gear. This inside here, this spline is what drives the spindle itself. And this is the pinion that drives the back gear, and your shift moves this back gear up and down. This is in back gear or slow speed. Notice the pinion's driving it, it's going to drive the spindle. You notice that the clutch dogs are disengaged from where this shaft is sitting. When you put it in high speed, it disengages this pinion, and the springs that are in here are actually push those clutch dogs up into this shaft. And that's why when you put it in high speed, you want to rotate the spindle a little bit and make sure it clicks, make sure these are actually engaged. Otherwise, they end up looking like this, worn out. Okay. The next thing we're going to take off is this spindle. Now, we're going to go through this entire thing. It's not always necessary. Or spindle. Pinion gear assembly, and it's held in with 2 bolts. Oh, there's a key right here. The goes in the timing gear, and it'll make a mess if you don't have that key in there to drive it. Don't lose the key. Take those two bolts out, and hopefully, this entire assembly will come out of there. Again, sometimes it's hard to get out. Sometimes you'll get parts of it out. Either the top cap will come off of this bearing, or, as I said, normally this bottom bearing is a press fit. It didn't come out. Here it is, still down in there. Now, if you noticed a little glitch in the video, that's because I've spent the last 10 minutes not putting you through the pain of getting this bearing out of there, since it didn't come out with the assembly. But anyhow, normally it's pressed onto that shaft. Looks like something happened. And there's another bearing up in here beneath all the grease. We'll put that aside for right now and get back to that, because we're certainly going to replace those bearings. We might replace the entire pinion shaft. The next thing we want to take out is the back gear assembly itself. And that's actually the only thing that holds that in at this point is the shift lever. So we're going to, by the way, those professional how-to shows, they pre-do everything, so they don't have those little unexpected adventures. But you're seeing it live in all its glory. And yeah, you're going to run into the occasional challenge in any of these things. Mostly something like that, removing a bearing from a blind hole. That's always fun. Anyhow, this shift lever, which has a spline on it, let's get back over here where it belongs. Pulls out. There's the gear. In a minute you'll see what that engages. But that's the gear that actually moves this entire back gear assembly up and down. Now the back gear assembly itself should come right out. And you can see, first of all, the rack that pinion gear moves it up and down on. A couple of things to point out. There are 3 springs underneath here. You go into pockets, and that's the springs that actually move the back gear up and apply the pressure to the gear in order to engage these splines. That's the click you hear when you put it into high speed or direct drive. We're going to take those out. The rest of this housing is pretty much nothing left, so we're going to clean it out real good. A couple of things on the back gear assembly. We're going to be tearing it down a little bit more. A very important piece is this carbon steel washer that slides on here. This is the washer. It actually rides on a lip on this collar, and that's how the springs apply pressure to it. So we're going to get that out of here right away. It doesn't really matter which direction it goes on. You can see the little lip down here. Maybe you can see it. Anyhow, we're going to take this apart. There are 2 bearings in here that this entire assembly support. The entire assembly, they often start making noise, occasionally go completely bad. So we're going to take this apart next and get rid of those. But I'm going to clean all this stuff up first, and you'll see another glitch in the video while I go do that. And then we'll get to finishing the disassembly. Okay, after a quick cleaning in the magic gunk tank, it's a little bit easier to see the parts. The 2 assemblies that make up the back gear assembly, which was assembled to disassemble, is the pinion assembly and the back gear itself. This is pretty simple. Underneath there is just the shaft. It's got a bearing on either end, and the pinion gear that drives the back gear, which is held on with a set screw and a shaft. And when you forget which way this pinion gear goes on, it does matter. There's the direction it goes. The pulley goes on this side, and this is the bottom, and that's the direction it goes. So you can refer back to this. Aren't I helpful? Okay, but anyhow, we're going to disassemble this first and replace these two bearings that are in here. This whole thing has a shaft, which the worm, this is the worm that drives the power down feed. We'll show you that at some other time, the other side of it. There's another gear that sets on there, and that's the gear that's engaged with the down feed clutch. But this shaft through here, including the dogs, is pressed in to both this gear and the two bearings. As I mentioned, this part stays stationary. To review here, there's the rack that the shift lever moves on to move this guy up and down, and the all-important washer that fits on a lift on this stationary part and lets the springs apply pressure to the whole thing. First thing we have to do to disassemble this is to take off this lock nut, which locks the whole thing together. The proper way to do it is with a spanner, wrench, or a socket with dogs on it, but we don't have that, so I'm going to hopefully do it with just a punch and a hammer, the main tool, remember. And the easiest way to do this is risk punching a hole in your belly. Tight. This is really fine thread, so try not to mess it up. Well, I won't say try, don't mess it up. Alright. And that's the lock nut that holds everything together, puts the preload on the bearings, and it goes in that way. So anyhow, the next place we're going to go is we're going to remove this shaft, the entire thing, so we got to go back to the press. Follow me. Okay, I'm going to press this entire shaft out. Now the clutch dog part here is part of that shaft. So I'm going to put it in my press and support the gear itself, but not the shaft. We're going to push it through the entire thing. The hardest press fit is in the back gear, and that's on the bottom, so it won't hurt anything. Again, I got a little shaft that fits in there, and we'll stack things up. And hopefully this guy will come right out. And fall on the floor. And that's what that shaft looks like. Again, the direct drive clutch dog's on top, goes through the back gear, the two bearings, and then a retainer nut here, and then the drive for the power down feed. So back to our table. Here we are again. Someday we're going to redo all this, and we'll actually have a second person to operate the camera. Again, that's the shaft we just removed. There is a key, which I've already lost, but I know where it is. But there is a key right there, and that key fits into a keyway on the back here. This is the bearing assembly itself. Notice it's got one bearing up here and one in the bottom. And we have to get one of these out. I'm going to take this one out. And underneath on either side of this is another one of our beloved snap rings. So we're going to put this aside. Here's the tip. Notice both sides sort of look the same. So what I'm going to do right now, before I get too far involved, I'm going to take a Sharpie and mark the bottom of it. And not with a mark that I'm going to forget what the hell it means in 2 days. It says bottom. So I know which direction that back here goes back on this assembly. Alright, so get that out of the way. And I need to take one of these bearings out, and then there's snap rings inside here that locate it. The easiest way to do this is literally get your punch. Again, it's not a tremendous press strip, but it is a press strip. And try and get a purchase on part of this. And you'll quickly, if you notice in here, there's a spacer. And that spacer, if it was riding right, should be sort of locked in between the two bearings, because that really puts the preload on it. Well, it's not technically preload, but it puts pressure on the bearings. As soon as you get to move that one, you'll be able to get that out of the way, and it gives you a much better purchase on that long bearing. Then it's just a matter of working it out a little bit on each side, so again, because it's a thing that's soft. I did have a piece of wood. So we'll just work. And there it is. Notice in here, we have an improper assembly. Somebody's been in here before, no doubt. It's 50 years old. So there's that bearing. There's a spacer. This is a wave washer, which actually sits on the bottom side of this bearing and bears against this snap ring in back. Anyhow, there's two snap rings in here, internal snap rings. You really don't have to remove them. Just get that second bearing out, stick the new ones in, roll it up the right way, press the shaft back in. But we'll show you how to put all this stuff back together in another series of videos. Okay, we've pretty much disassembled everything in the drive section of this Bridgeport. Like I said, another series of videos, hopefully I'll get them made, and we'll show you how to reassemble it all, but basically it just goes back together the same way. It's not rocket science, it's not confusing. There's a couple of little tricks, both disassembly and assembly. I think once you see how it's assembled, or how it's put together, I should say, by this, that you shouldn't really have any problems. The only portion we didn't cover, the 3 units we originally removed, is the top. There's not much to it. This is the plate that pushes down on that pulley that varies the speed. This is where those 2 spacers go in and the bolts to hold it to the top. This rides in the back on a post. The post should have a washer and a cotter key through it at the bottom. And the front is the chain assembly, and all this does when you, I can manage to get it in there, like that, and when you turn the crank, it just pulls down on that chain. And of course, all the spring loading is supplied by the motor pulley, which has that big spring on. And we will get to that too, eventually. But anyhow, that's all there is in the top. It needs some cleaning. There's really not much wrong that can go wrong with this area. Clean it up, oil the chain, and that's about it. And that's the entire drive section of a 2J Bridgeport. After we get this all assembled, we'll make another series of videos. That's 3 series of planned videos that will show you how to take the head itself apart and how to go through it. And there are a couple of serious tricks in there, and at least one other Bridgeport good idea. But anyhow, for now, thanks for watching, and I'll get busy on reassembling this. Bye.